tariffs, elections, tax season? Yeah, after all that, we may have forgotten it's tax season. We're going to talk about tax deductions for your investment properties. And is affordability actually getting closer for first-time home buyers? My friends, we talk about this and more with our good friend and mortgage broker, Mr. Dion Beg, right after this. Here we are, my friends, with our favorite mortgage broker in all the land, Mr. Dion Beg. How you doing, my man?
Hey Gary, I'm good. I just noticed my camera feed is a bit fuzzy, but that's on point because I feel a bit fuzzy today. Been very, very busy. Lots and lots. It's very surprising. The market is very busy right now. We've got lots of applications, lots of people buying, people in bidding wars even.
It's nuts. I like it. This is the fuzzy look on the Canadian real estate market.
That's also, I need to shave, so that's part of the fuzziness too.
There you
it's
have
not all
it.
the camera.
It all checks out. It all checks out. What are we talking about today? Well, we're going to talk about tax because we're leading into tax season. Amongst all the election and tariff talk and everything else, my friends, did you remember it's also tax season? So we're going to touch on that.
It's whatever the opposite of Christmas is tax season. Everybody hates it.
That's right. I have a good friend back in Ontario, and his wife's birthday is always the last due date for his taxes, and he hates it. He hates that day so much.
What a terrible day to remember. Oh, I'm very sorry for his wife.
I know.
It is what it is. But yes, I've got tax on the mind, and I've been reading up on a bunch of interesting tax stuff. But why don't we start off with an old idea that I think we should revive, especially coming up into this election, because I know there's lots of talks about different tax breaks and things that each party is trying to buy votes with. But there's this old one that came up in some recent reading, Gary. We might have briefly touched on it, and it's this idea of having a lifetime income tax. Okay, so let me just tell you the story, the background. I think people would find it interesting. It's unfortunate that it's not part of one of these key parties' platforms right now. But anyway, let's talk about it. So back in 2004, there was a race for the leadership of the Conservative Party. That was ultimately won by Mr. Harper. But Tony Clement was one of the other people running for that position. And he put forward this idea of lifetime tax for Canadian citizens. So this is the way it would work. And I'm just going to read a little bit off screen here. So basically what they were suggesting is that for the first $250,000 of your earned income in Canada, you should pay zero tax. Okay? How do you feel about that, Gary?
Pretty good up till that point, yeah.
Right. Now, once you hit 250,000 and earn between 250 and 500K, the tax would then be 14%, and it would progressively move up in $250,000 brackets to 20%, 24%, and then 27% for anybody earning over $1 million a year. And, I will tell you, there's a bunch of reasons why this didn't work. Mostly the key reason being, if you're stopping younger people paying tax, you have to find that tax elsewhere, and it usually comes from older people, and older people vote. And so they said, no, we don't want this. But I will tell you this, from a mortgage lending perspective, I really do feel for younger people who are quite obviously disadvantaged now because their incomes have not kept up with the cost of housing. And, house prices are now 10 times the cost of 10 times income in many cities. And so I could actually see how this kind of thing would really help younger Canadians in relation to purchasing a property, right? Now, there are other things that governments can do in terms of incentivizing and making it easier for those younger people to buy. But this, I think, would have been an interesting one that, of course, if you're younger, and this is when you have to buy the house, buy the car, have the children, pay for daycare, all that money is so much more meaningful at that younger age than at an older age when you've made it, right? So I can see how that would be beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the idea of thinking a little outside the box. although, as you mentioned, it has some, all tax cuts means less income into the big pie. And you might say, well, the government of Canada or your local government, even your local city government might be spending too much. Well, that's probably a fair comment too, right? There's always that fine middle ground. But I think we got to give credit where credit's due. When people bring new ideas to the table, they may be so wacky, but something will stick, right? I think we got to encourage people to keep bringing new ideas to the table.
Look, man, this may not be as wacky as some of the stuff we've seen go on in the world in the last month. Let's face it. Right?
That might be the most truest statement you've ever said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. Well, and here's something else too, right? And we've talked about this in the past: capital gains tax, and the previous leader of the Liberal government of Canada suggested, and it was actually moving forward with increasing the capital gains tax. And
Yes.
and of course now Mark Carney's come in and he's basically said, no way, we're not doing that. We're going to hold it where it's at. And both parties' platform would be somewhat similar, a similar stance. And we've even talked about even the Conservative Party even talking about that tax. I forget, pardon me because I forget the exact name of it, but like a deferral program, a 1031 exchange like they have in the States, where if you own an investment, not necessarily investment property, but an investment, and then you go and reinvest that money, that investment money into another investment vehicle, you're pushing your tax obligation down the road in a sense. So there's always pros and cons, but I like the capital gains tax. Both parties say, no way, we are not increasing it. That's a good thing.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And look, while we're on that topic of tax, Gary, let me just explain something. And this was on a call this week where I had to explain it to a client about tax deductibility on investment property. Okay. So a lot of people don't know this. And I'd really like to sort of clarify that when you become a property owner for investment purposes, you effectively become like a small business owner. Okay. And as we probably all know, when a small business incurs an expense, then that expense is a tax write off against the income earned. Now, the best way I've found to explain this is to give this story with the idea that, okay, Gary, imagine that you are an Uber driver, okay, and you pick me up and you drop me at the airport, and I pay you $100 for that trip. Okay, that's the Uber fare. Now, the thing is, though, when you do your taxes at the end of the year, yes, you're going to put forward that $100, but that trip cost you, let's say, $20 in gas to drive me to the airport. Okay. So that $20 will also be put forward to the government, to the CRA. And you say, look, I made $100, but it cost me $20 to make that $100. And that $20 is a tax deduction. And therefore, you don't pay tax on $100, you pay tax on $80, right? So that's pretty simple. That makes sense. So the question is, what is the gas? What are the expenses as it relates to investment property? So the expenses will, of course, be minor improvements or maintenance of the property. Let's say you have to replace a loose faucet in the kitchen. Okay, so that's an expense. What about property management? If you have a property manager who you're paying $200 a month, yes, that's an expense. So that's a tax deduction, as well as your property, the taxes on the property, the municipal taxes, as well as the insurance on the property. And this is a big one that a lot of people don't know, Gary, which is 100% of the interest on your mortgage is tax deductible when it comes to your investment property. So these things encompass the gas that it costs you to run your small business, which in this case is an investment property. And I've actually come across clients who haven't been claiming these expenses on their tax return because they simply weren't aware of that. So yeah, as we're in tax season, guys, please remember to claim those expenses.
Well, and let me preface this as neither Dion and I are tax experts or tax advisors, but we have lived this in a sense, and with our own investment properties, and certainly talk with your accountant. And the other thing too, Dion, is and this will be right up your alley where you can really appreciate this. If you go and help and get somebody a line of credit, secure line of credit, or any type of line of credit for that matter, they use those funds to go purchase an investment property, what have you. The interest on that is a cost and
Correct.
a
Correct.
tax deductible as well. So, my friends, there's many ways to look at this, and there's many banks out there that, let's say you used 100,000 of your $200,000 line of credit. There's many banks out there that'll take that 100,000 and actually divert it into a separate what's the word?
Account. Separate account.
That's right, to make it much easier for these tax purposes, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So we have clients who might have a line of credit for their personal holidays or their personal vehicles, and then a separate line of credit that they use for investing. And that second line of credit interest is tax deductible.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, my friends, if you're, sometimes you don't know to ask, and we can always appreciate that. But and that's why Dion and I host these calls to, sometimes this, you don't know what you don't know, and then when you realize that, hey, I heard that 5-10 years ago, I need to implement that now. Go do it. Talk to your accountant, talk to your advisor, and make sure you're claiming all of these expenses, because it helps in the long run. Okay. Mm-hmm. Lifetime tax, tax deductions, capital gains tax, all these things are good for own personal pocketbooks, if you will. I put up an article just the other day on my website, realtychatter.com, and it talked about, is March the bottom of the market? Well, we won't know for 6 months, always. However, there's some opportunities that are arriving here in April, and as we look forward into May, with obviously the affordability of homes. And we know that, Gary, well, you might say, there's so many listings right now. Yes, there is a lot of listings, and what's that doing to pricing? It's bringing pricing down ever so slightly and making it more affordable for more buyers. And those more buyers, remember, in any type of market, it's always easier to move down than it is to move up. And we're seeing a lot of people making the choice to move down, but we're also, Dion, as you shared offline, you're going to talk about it, you're seeing more buyers enter the market. And we might see more buyers enter the market over the next 6 months than we've seen in the last 24, 36 months or even more, Dion.
Yeah, and again, I understand on a national level, numbers seem depressed, but I can tell you inside my brokerage, inside just this last week, we've just approved 4 people for purchases that they brought to us in the last week. And many of them said, okay, Dion, we're going to go shopping in the price range of 700 to 800, but we're definitely not going to cross 750. That was the sort of the promise they'd made to themselves. But when they got out there with their real estate agent, they realized that there's so many people in that entry-level price range that, the 750 number they wanted to hit, they actually ended up closing at 790. So that is what I'm seeing on the front lines here. And I'm seeing, more and more inquiry from first-time home buyers wanting to get out there and buy.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. And we always say some of the best properties to own as investors, as it were, is that entry-level product line, because it's always easier to enter, and it's easy to sell and to get out of it too. So this will be an interesting couple of months as we enter those spring markets. And I know if you're in Toronto or the outskirts, it doesn't feel weather-wise like a spring market, because we're still seeing snow and ice storms and everything like that. And don't what's the word I'm looking for? Don't let that pass you by, because weather in areas like this have a dramatic influence on the purchasing and people's motivation to go shopping, especially when you have power outages and things like that, and people need to take care of themselves and their family first. Weather plays a big part in the cyclical real estate cycle of Canada. And I think as May comes and gets closer to us, and those May flowers come, we're going to see this market pick up ever so slightly. But that ever so slightly will feel like an abundance, because we just haven't been used to that over the last 6 months or so.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's be honest. We haven't had a normal real estate market since 2019. I think. Okay. And what I mean by that is we've been impacted by so many things external to the actual seasons of the earth, which is what we used to basically bank our seasonality on. And it's been impacted by, firstly, COVID. Secondly, interest rate impacts. And now, right now, international events, especially these tariffs, which, are kind of spinning the earth in a different direction if we want to keep with that seasonality, in that me and my team, we're looking at these numbers and we go, wow, if we are this busy now, then this could be an extremely busy year. But if the wind blows in a different direction, then it could change the course of what happens going forward. But if we go forward at the rate at which we are going forward, then we're looking at probably transaction volume at least 25 to 50% greater than last year is what we're seeing.
Yeah, that's incredible. My friends, there's always opportunity, and it's just how you look at it, of course, and how you perceive it. The last, I will say, the last 6 months to this year will definitely be busier than the first 6 months. Excuse me, and the trailing 6 months of the past year as well. Dion, talk to us a little bit about what banks and how banks are approving people at this moment, because I think it's always important to kind of check in with really the banks and how they're perceiving these opportunities to fund transactions.
Yeah, so very high level, guys. It's always three major things that banks look at. That's your income, your credit, and your down payment. And together, they make the core of your application. In terms of some changes, and this is important actually, Gary, a major bank in the last week came out and broadcast the fact that for people who are working in the automotive industry and in the steel and aluminum industries, which are being impacted by these tariffs, that they are reducing their total debt service limits for those people. Okay. So what that means is that for those people, you may not be able to borrow as much as you would have been able to borrow prior to the announcement of these tariffs. And if you look at it from the bank's perspective, what they're ultimately doing is they're protecting their shareholders, which is their responsibility, from exposure to risks that may be higher than standard. And so just understand also, if this is broadcast out there in the world, then you've got to also imagine what's actually going on behind closed doors with decision making that we are not privy to, okay? Where maybe access to credit may in fact become a little tighter, depending on, again, what happens with tariffs and which specific industries these tariffs may start to impact.
That's interesting. It's always important to check in with your mortgage broker to find out what's going on, because let me tell you, my friends, you don't want to be trying to arrange a mortgage when your closing date or your refinance deadline is next week. You want to do it months in advance. And Dion, how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, at kangamortgage.ca or Instagram at the Dion Beg.
There you have it, my friends. That's the Dion Beg. I'm Gary McGowan. We'll see everybody in the next episode. Goodbye for now.